5 blank envelopes, my siblings' names, my wedding. After a lifetime of being the family afterthought, I finally had a choice. Include them, or protect my peace. What I did next sparked a family war, and I don't regret a thing. The invitation cards were ivory with embossed silver lettering stacked neatly in front of me like a deck of decisions I wasn't ready to make. My handwriting trembled as I addressed one after another. Co-workers, old friends from college, my yoga instructor. Then I reached the pile of family names. 5 envelopes with blank fronts. I stared at them for a long time. Thomas, Rebecca, Daniel, Claire, Michael. I picked them up slowly, like they might sting, and set them aside. Not ripped, not discarded, just moved away. The air was still in my apartment. Early spring sunlight poured across the hardwood floor, illuminating a trail of dust motes that danced in the quiet. My phone buzzed with a new email from the florist. I ignored it. Instead, I walked to the closet and pulled out the wedding dress. Not for the first time, I stepped into it alone. No sisters zipping it up behind me. No mother adjusting the straps. Just me, in front of a mirror, smoothing the lace over my waist. A dress meant for a moment I would not share with them. Funny how silence makes space for memory. I was 7 when Thomas got married. I still remember the mint green dress Mom made me wear. It was itchy, with stiff ruffles. But I wore it the whole day hoping someone might ask me to twirl. They didn't, because I wasn't there. Not really. They told me I was too young for the ceremony, and left me at home with Grandma and a VHS tape of The Little Mermaid. I sat on the couch, waiting for someone to come back and tell me how it went. No one did. Rebecca's wedding was next. I was 11. I begged her to let me come. I offered to carry flowers or hand out programs. She smiled like I'd asked something adorable and impossible. "It's just a grown-up thing," she said, brushing my hair. "You wouldn't understand." That night, I sat in my room wearing a pink satin headband and plastic pearl earrings, pretending I'd gone. Daniel didn't even bother explaining. I found out about his wedding through a photo on Facebook. Him in a gray suit, his new wife radiant in white, my other siblings circled around them like a perfect frame. I stared at that photo for 10 minutes before noticing something small. My mother's necklace on Claire's neck. The one she used to say would be mine one day. When Claire got married, I was 23, an adult. I thought surely this time, but no. "We wanted something intimate," she said, voice dripping with practiced pity. "Just siblings and parents. No +1s, no extended invitations." She meant no me. At some point, the pattern stopped being confusing and became obvious. I wasn't family. I was the footnote in their story. The one they called sensitive when I cried, dramatic when I asked why, selfish when I stopped asking. Now it's my wedding. Mine. I looked at the untouched invitations again. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Don't forget to include your brothers and sisters in the invites. It would be awful if you left anyone out. No hi. No I'm happy for you. Just a warning in polite packaging." I didn't respond. That night, I dreamed I was back in my childhood bedroom, the one with the wallpaper peeling near the windowsill and the bookshelf sagging under yearbooks I wasn't in. I was wearing a white dress and sitting on the edge of my bed, waiting. No one knocked. No one came. I woke up to the sound of my own heartbeat. The next day, I told my fiancé we would not be inviting my family. He looked surprised but didn't argue. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded. The calls started within days. "Are you really not inviting us?" Michael sounded like he couldn't believe it. "You're overreacting. That stuff was years ago." I told him I wasn't interested in debating my own memory. Rebecca called next. "I thought we were past all that," she said. "You're being vindictive." "No," I said. "I'm being honest." Mom's message was the worst. "You're creating division. Family is everything. If you go through with this, people will talk. You'll regret it." But something inside me had shifted. For the first time, their approval felt irrelevant. I'm not looking to hurt them. I'm just done hurting for them. The wedding is in 6 weeks. I walk through the venue with my planner who asks if we want a family seating section. I say no. Just friends. People who chose me back. People who didn't need a reason to include me. In the center of the reception hall, there's a table. At it, a single empty chair, the one I used to save in every memory. I walk past it now, toward the space I'm building. Not out of spite, but out of peace. And for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting to be chosen. I already chose myself. The first message that truly rattled me came 2 days later. Rebecca again, but this time angrier. "You're making a spectacle out of your pain. It's a wedding, not a vendetta." I stared at the screen, wondering if she genuinely believed that, or if she'd always just seen me as a stain on her carefully curated family image. The audacity of them to rewrite history like I was a child throwing a tantrum over cake, not a woman remembering 20 years of exclusion. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the venue again just to walk the perimeter, to breathe it in. It was an old stone house converted into an event space, tucked between hills and a grove of sycamores. Quiet, grounded, like everything I wasn't allowed to be back then. While pacing the edge of the garden, I thought about Claire's wedding. I was 23. I'd already finished college, had a full-time job, even bought my own used car. And still, "It's a small ceremony," was the line I got. Small, except I saw the photos later. All the cousins. All the spouses. Her ex-roommate from college. Just not me. I remember sitting in my car that night in the grocery store parking lot, wearing the dress I'd hoped to wear to the wedding. It was blue with tiny embroidered stars on the sleeves. I don't know what hurt more, the silence or how well it fit. I wasn't angry then. Not yet. Just tired. Tired of showing up for people who made a habit of forgetting me. Now they're remembering me, but only because I've drawn a line. Mom called again that evening. Left another voicemail. Her voice was tight. Rehearsed. "Honey, I really don't want this to turn into a grudge you carry forever. Your siblings love you. They're just not good at showing it, that line. They're just not good at showing it, as if emotional negligence was a personality quirk. Like some people are allergic to cats, and some just can't acknowledge your existence. The next day, I got a call from my cousin Lila. We hadn't spoken in years, not out of malice, just distance. She told me she heard what was happening, that she always noticed how I was treated, that even as kids it felt off, like the family couldn't quite figure out what to do with me. Honestly, she said, I'm proud of you. I wish I'd drawn my lines earlier. After that, I allowed myself to cry. Not because I was sad, because I felt seen. 2 nights later, I got a group message. Mom, Thomas, Claire, Daniel, Rebecca. They wanted a family meeting, a video call, to clear the air. I laughed out loud when I saw it, as if 5 decades of erasure could be unraveled in a Google Meet. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat on the floor of my apartment with my best friend, Elle. We ordered takeout, tried on shoes for the wedding, and filled out seating charts with people who never made me feel small. I kept one chair open on the edge of the layout, a silent reminder. Not for them, but for me, that I had been there, that I remembered. My fiancé asked if I was nervous about how it would all play out. No, I said. I've lived my whole life on their terms. This is the first time I'm writing the script, the cards with their names, still in the drawer, unsent, unopened. And for once, that doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like freedom. It started with the Facebook post. Not mine. Claire's. A photo of a lace-trimmed invitation on her kitchen counter, captioned, "Can't believe my baby sister is getting married. Sad we won't be there to witness it, but we'll be praying for her big day." Just vague enough to sound gracious. Just sharp enough to land like a slap. The comments flooded in. Family, friends, distant aunts. People who didn't know the full story. What happened? Why aren't you going? You're such a good sister, Claire. She replied to everyone with the same message. It wasn't our choice. I sat there rereading it until my tea went cold. My stomach twisted, not with guilt, but with a strange, bitter grief. The kind that comes when someone breaks your heart gently and calls it love. By the end of the week, the narrative was out of my hands. Thomas called. Voice stern like he was speaking to a colleague. "You've made this harder than it had to be," he said. "People are talking. You're making Mom look bad." I almost laughed, as if I had painted this picture, as if I was the one who'd left a child off the guest list again and again and again. I hung up. The following morning, a card arrived in the mail, handwritten envelope, no return address. Inside was a wedding photo, Daniel's, and a note in his wife's handwriting. "You were missed that day. We hope you find peace in yours." I couldn't tell if it was cruel or kind, maybe both. I spent the afternoon at the venue again, walking the garden path we'd picked for our vows. The roses were just beginning to bloom, soft blush and gold against the early spring green. I imagined my siblings here, imagined them sitting stiffly in the back row, judging the music, the food, the fact that I'd chosen to stand without them. Then I imagined them not here at all, and for the first time that vision didn't sting. Later that evening, Mom showed up at my apartment. No call, no warning, just a knock at the door and her familiar perfume. Too floral and too familiar. She didn't step inside right away, just stood there, looking tired, older than I remembered. "I don't understand what you're doing," she said. "You're letting bitterness ruin your wedding." "No," I told her. "I'm letting clarity protect it." She shook her head, stepping into the living room like she still owned space here. "Your siblings didn't mean to hurt you." "Maybe not," I said, "but they did. And not once did anyone stop to ask why I was always the one left behind." She sat on the edge of the couch like the cushions were too soft to hold her guilt. "They love you," she murmured. "Then why didn't they show it when it mattered?" Silence. She reached into her purse, pulled out one of the unsent invitations I'd placed in her mailbox weeks ago. "You sure you want to do this? Once the day comes and goes, you can't undo it." I nodded. "Then I hope it's worth it," she said, rising. "But don't expect them to forget." "I'm not asking them to forget," I said. "I'm asking them to finally remember." She didn't look back as she left. That night, I burned the spare invitations in the kitchen sink, watched the edges curl and blacken until all that was left was ash and steam. The fire alarm didn't even go off. Funny. For the first time, neither did I. The morning after Mom's visit, I woke up with a stillness I didn't recognize. Not peace, exactly, just the absence of something. A noise that had finally stopped. For years, my internal dialogue had been filled with bargaining. Maybe next time. Maybe if I try harder. Maybe they don't realize how it feels. But now there was just quiet, until the phone rang. This time it was Daniel's wife. "I'm calling because your decision has caused complications," she said, like I'd set off a fire alarm at a dinner party. She said Daniel had been contacted by our uncle, who'd seen Claire's post and wanted to know if I was mentally okay. Not emotionally, mentally. The implication burned. "He thinks you're punishing the family," she added. "I'm protecting myself," I said. "You could have just talked to them." "I did. For years. They weren't listening." There was a pause on her end, and I could practically hear her deciding how to label me. Not angry, not grieving, just difficult. Later that afternoon, I sat in my old bedroom. I'd driven back to Mom's house. Not to talk. Just to look. She wasn't home. The room was smaller than I remembered. The wallpaper with tiny pink flowers had faded, and the mirror on the closet door was slightly cracked in the corner. I stood in front of it and closed my eyes. For a moment I was 13 again, in a dress I'd bought with babysitting money, waiting by the window while everyone else went to Rebecca's reception. I sat down on the bed, now covered in storage boxes and spare linens. No photos of me on the dresser. Just Thomas's family portrait in a silver frame. I wasn't even in the background of this house anymore. When I left, I didn't take anything with me. Just the knowledge that I wasn't imagining the years of silence. That night, I met with Elle and a few close friends at the cafe down the street. They'd helped with everything: decor ideas, playlist choices, even standing in as makeshift bridesmaids for the ceremony. We were laughing about a cake flavor fiasco when Elle leaned in and said, "You know they might not forgive you for this." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," I replied. "I'm asking for room to breathe." Then she smiled in that way only your real people smile. Soft, sure, completely unfazed by the storm outside your window. Back at home, I added a final detail to the wedding seating chart, a row marked, "Chosen family." It stretched longer than I'd expected. People who never forgot my birthday. People who answered every call. Who listened the first time, not the 15th. No one had to earn their seat. They simply showed up, and that was enough. The next morning, I received a text from Michael. "You've really done it this time. Don't expect anyone to come around after this." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "I'm not expecting anyone. That's the point." 3 weeks before the wedding, the silence cracked wide open. It started with a voicemail from Rebecca, this time sobbing. Not the manipulative kind of crying, the kind I'd grown used to decoding since childhood. This was raw, disorganized. I didn't recognize her voice at first. I don't understand why you hate us so much," she choked out. "You were always the baby. We thought you liked your space. We didn't think you cared." That last part hit harder than I expected. We didn't think you cared. As if my quiet, my hesitation to beg, had made me complicit in my own exclusion. I sat with that for a long time. The same day, Mom emailed me a family compromise. A group photo on a neutral backdrop, everyone smiling politely at the camera, dressed in coordinated pastels. She said they wanted to print it in the local paper's wedding announcement section. I wasn't in the photo. At the bottom, she'd written, "We can say we're supporting you from afar. Let's not turn this into more than it is." More than it is. I closed my laptop. The truth is, this was never about a wedding. This was about the little girl who learned not to ask twice, who watched her family take photos without her, and taught herself to stop waving from behind the camera. The phone started ringing more often after that. Claire called once, but I didn't answer. Then came a group text. "At least invite Mom. She's devastated." But Mom wasn't devastated when I was 7, and waiting by the window in my flower dress. Or 13, sitting on the couch in shoes too tight because I thought maybe they'd change their minds. Or 23, looking at wedding photos I hadn't even known were taken. She was only devastated now because I'd finally stopped knocking. That weekend, I visited the venue again, alone. I walked the hall where our reception would be held. The chairs were stacked neatly, the floors freshly polished. In the center, I stood where the sweetheart table would go, and I imagined it, me, surrounded by friends who called on bad days, friends who remembered to ask twice, friends who didn't need a shared bloodline to offer real belonging. I brought the final guest list with me. There were names missing, yes, but there was no space left empty. In the quiet of that room, I read each name out loud, not for ceremony, for closure. A week before the wedding, the guilt campaign reached full volume. The phone calls had slowed, but the group messages intensified. Screenshots, indirect posts, quotes about family unity and forgiveness. Thomas even sent a screenshot of a family group chat I wasn't in. The caption, "Everyone agrees you're being cruel. Mom cried again this morning." I didn't respond, but I read every word, and that's what they don't realize. That silence is not absence. I read it all. I carry it all. I just don't perform my grief for them anymore. 3 days later, Mom sent me a photo. Not of her, not of flowers or memories, but of a white satin box with a dusty pink ribbon, the wedding card box from her own wedding. She said she was planning to bring it, just in case I changed my mind. I stared at it for a long time. I remembered it vaguely from the attic. It had once felt like a relic. Now it looked like a symbol of everything she wanted to insert into a day she hadn't earned a place in. I texted her 2 words, "Don't come." The next morning I woke up to a message from Michael. "If you don't invite us, we'll show up anyway." And that's when I snapped. I called the venue, asked about adding a private security detail. Nothing aggressive, just someone at the entrance with a list. The woman on the phone was gentle, didn't pry. "This happens more than people think," she said. "It's your day. You deserve to feel safe." That word, safe. I hadn't realized how unsafe I'd felt all these years until someone said it like a birthright. I walked into my apartment that night and found the stack of envelopes still in the drawer, the ones I'd kept. Maybe out of some faint, stupid hope that someone would finally say the right thing, I tore them in half, one by one. No drama, no shaking hands. Just the steady sound of paper giving way to truth. Later, while folding place cards, Elle asked if I was okay. I said, "I thought this would be the part where I felt lonely." "Do you?" she asked. I looked at the names in front of me, the ones who had sent RSVPs with handwritten notes, the ones who had offered to bring extra folding chairs, just in case. "No," I said. "I don't feel alone. I just feel done." And that was new, not victorious. Not vindicated, just done with waiting to be loved by people who only showed up when they needed something to blame. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves. Those had faded days ago. What kept me up was a strange kind of mourning. Not for the people I'd left off the guest list, but for the version of me who would have still been trying. The girl who'd sit up straight at family dinners, laughing too loud to be noticed. The young woman who bought 5 dresses for 5 weddings and never wore a single one. I sat on the couch in my robe, surrounded by candles and silence, scrolling through photos I hadn't looked at in years. Childhood birthdays, school recitals. Every picture told the same story. I was always slightly off to the side. Smiling but not centered. Present but peripheral. That version of me deserved a goodbye. So I wrote a letter I never planned to send. To the girl who tried. "You can rest now. You did everything right. You showed up, stayed quiet, forgave what you weren't even allowed to name. But that story's over. You're not the extra. You're the main event. And tomorrow, you take the stage without apology. I folded the note and slid it into a book I hadn't opened since college. I didn't need to read it again. It wasn't for future me. It was for the one who waited. At sunrise, I stepped outside with my coffee and watched the city turn gold. It felt like the universe paused for me, just for a second, like the whole world inhaled before the next chapter. That afternoon, I arrived at the venue early, before the makeup and the music and the noise. Just me and the echo of what I'd built. The planner asked one last time, "No family at all?" I smiled. "Depends on how you define it." And then I walked the space one final time. The aisle wasn't long, but every step felt like a mile crossed. Not toward a partner, I already had him, waiting patiently, the most steady presence I'd ever known, but toward myself. We didn't rehearse. I didn't want rehearsed. I wanted real. When the music started and I stepped through the archway, I didn't look for missing faces. I looked ahead, to friends tearing up, to chosen sisters holding bouquets, to love that never asked me to shrink. There was no drama, no protest, just a quiet, undeniable knowing this was mine, and no one could take it. After the ceremony, as the last notes of our song faded, and the clapping gave way to laughter and champagne flutes, I stepped outside for air. The sun was low, casting soft shadows across the lawn. I slipped off my shoes and stood barefoot on the stone path, the train of my dress gently brushing the ground. From inside came the muffled sounds of joy, real joy, not the brittle, performative kind I used to memorize at family gatherings. Elle found me a few minutes later. "They're trying to track you down for the first dance," I smiled. "Give me one more minute." She nodded, then hesitated. "You're not waiting for someone who isn't coming, are you?" "No," I said. "Not anymore." But it was a fair question. I had been that girl once, the one who kept glancing at the door, waiting for her name to finally be spoken with softness, the one who'd smile through her throat tightening, pretending being forgotten didn't hurt, not today. Inside, the reception roared on. To speeches that made me laugh, not ache, to old songs that weren't laced with family tension, to dancing where no one whispered behind a glass. At one point during dinner, I looked around the room. The tables were full, every seat taken by someone who had shown up. Not out of obligation, but out of love. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not the triumphant, I proved them wrong kind. Just a soft, full-bodied release. The kind that comes when you finally stop twisting yourself to fit inside someone else's story. After the toasts, my fiancé, now husband, pulled me aside. "I kept thinking today would break you open," he said, brushing hair from my cheek. "But you don't look broken. You look whole." "I think I finally am," I whispered. We danced then, not because tradition demanded it, but because we wanted to. Because I wasn't dancing to be seen, I was dancing because I was free. At the edge of the room, there was one empty chair. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe someone hadn't shown. Maybe it was a last-minute cancellation. But I didn't fill it. Let it stay empty. Let it be what it always was. A space held for people who never came. Let it remind me that absence, too, has a shape. And sometimes leaving it unfilled is the most honest thing you can do. 2 days after the wedding, the text started again. Short, cold, from Michael. "You made your point," from Mom. "I hope the day was everything you wanted." I couldn't sleep that night. And from Rebecca, the dagger wrapped in silk. "I would have come, you know, if you had just asked." I didn't reply. Not because I was trying to be cruel. Because I finally understood. They had always been waiting for me to ask permission to be loved. But love, real love, doesn't hinge on the right invitation. It shows up. It stays. It asks nothing in return, except truth. What came next wasn't rage. It was bargaining. The kind I used to do with myself, now reflected back in their words. "Let's meet for coffee. It's not too late to fix this. Family doesn't always get it right, but we're still family." And that line, that tired, weaponized mantra, was the one that told me everything I needed to know, because they hadn't changed. They were simply reacting to being excluded for the first time. The comfort of their own traditions had cracked, and now they were scrambling to patch over the silence with forced reconciliation. But it wasn't silence they were afraid of. It was consequence. That week, I took down the wedding decorations at home. The garlands, the handwritten notes, the leftover favors. I kept the place cards, though, the ones that said "Chosen Family," hand-drawn by Elle in soft gold ink. I placed them in a box labeled "Things Built, Not Given." I got a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I saw the photos. "I wish I'd reached out sooner. You looked radiant." I responded simply, "There's still time." Because some doors don't close all at once. Some close gently, and only for those who keep choosing not to knock. That night, I opened the guest book. Page after page of handwritten joy. Notes from friends, colleagues, people who had no stake in my history, but still chose to be part of my future. And then, in the back, tucked between 2 blank pages, a note from Elle. "This isn't just your beginning. It's your homecoming. You didn't walk away. You walked back to yourself." I closed the book with a steady hand. There were no more decisions to make. Only the life I was finally free to live. It rained the morning after we got back from the honeymoon. Not a dramatic downpour. Just that slow, steady kind that makes the world feel softer, quieter. I stood by the window in a sweatshirt and socks, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the rain beat along the glass. It felt like closure, not the cinematic kind. Just the real, adult version, where nothing explodes, no one begs for forgiveness, and peace, looks like silence. There were still messages waiting on my phone, a photo of a family dinner I wasn't at, a vague post from Mom about the ache of missing someone who won't talk to you. Claire had tagged me in a post about forgiveness. I didn't open any of them. I wasn't angry anymore, just uninterested. That's the part no one warns you about, how boring resentment becomes when you finally stop feeding it, how the weight of always trying dissolves the second you walk away from the stage and realize no one was watching anyway. We had dinner that night with friends. Real friends. People who didn't ask for versions of me that were easier to digest. People who didn't flinch when I said no. Someone asked how married life was. I said lighter, and it was. Not because love fixed me, but because I'd stopped handing out pieces of myself to people who only wanted them on their terms. Later, I walked through the apartment, past the bookshelf where I'd hidden that unsent letter to my younger self. I didn't reread it. I didn't need to. I knew what it said. And more importantly, I believed it now. Before bed, I glanced at the wedding photo framed on our nightstand. Not a posed one, just a candid shot, laughing, wind in my hair, surrounded by people who showed up. There in the corner, a chair still sat empty. It wasn't cropped out. It stayed. A quiet reminder, not of who didn't come, but of what I no longer need. Because the real miracle wasn't that they were finally sorry, it's that I didn't need them to be.